All right, folks, we're going to get started here. So if everyone could take their seats, that would be great. Could I have someone close the door in the back too when we get a chance? Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Summer Colley with the Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships, and I'm excited to present our presenter, Sarah Henshaw, who's going to be facilitating a workshop on recipes for good partnerships. Sarah Henshaw is the director and founder of Leaves of Change, a Vermont women-owned advisory and consulting firm that consults nonprofits on partnership development, community organizing, and she's worked for 20 years in this field around the world and across the U.S., advising nonprofits on their work. So thank you, Sarah.
Great, thank you, Summer. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. I'm going to first just say I am not a microphone, lights, PowerPoint kind of girl. So if at any point I get a little flustered, it's because I'm normally in a church basement or in a community center. But I'm really excited today to be with you guys and to talk about how you do some internal work before you get to partnerships within your organization, and then how do you use that to align purposes for partnerships. So let's get started. As I said, I'm not a PowerPoint kind of girl, so on the wall over on my left, you're that way, depending on how you're sitting. I have kind of just some outline, I have some outcomes that I've outlined that I'd like to be able to try to help you take away from the session today. The first is just talk a little bit about and learn a little bit about what is a successful partnership? What are some of those characteristics? Each partnership is going to be slightly different in terms of how you define success, but there's some characteristics of what kind of helps a partnership be successful. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. We're then going to think about how do we lead to that success and those characteristics in our own internal conversations before coming to the table in the partnership. What are some of those things that you need to be talking about and clear about internally within your organization before you can start to align? And then we're going to talk about how does that, those conversations and what you've defined in terms of what you need to give and get, how do those align with the partnership in total, and how does that help create a overall purpose for your partnership? So that's kind of the journey we're going to take today. And we're lucky we have some folks in the room that have some partnerships that are going to help give some grounding examples when we talk about these worksheets. A couple of just logistical things. If you have questions, I will have moments where I pause for you guys to ask questions, but I'm also very open if you have a question as I'm moving along, in case I don't want you to forget it. And as I said, I'm normally very interactive in church basements, so if you have one, blurt it out and we'll see if I can answer it, or if I'm going to say, maybe we'll talk about it in a few minutes, so don't be shy. All right, so we're talking about successful partnerships. I lay out here just some things to think about in terms of what needs to have, what characteristics need to be in place for a partnership to be successful. I don't think any of these are going to be surprises. These are not, this is not rocket science. This is pretty straightforward. But I like to just lay those out so that when we start to talk about how do you get there, we know what we're talking about. The first is, quite obvious, mutual trust. Right? You have to be able to trust the people you're in partnerships with. You have to be able to, have faith that they're going to be able to do what they say they're going to do. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is really laying the groundwork for that mutual trust that's really so important for any successful partnership. The second, again, not rocket science, nothing really special here, but you really, both partners or all partners, if there's multiple partners, need to see the benefit in that partnership. Why are you there? Why are you at the table? What is important to you? That seems pretty straightforward. The next one is the one where we start to get into a little bit, a more complicated conversation. There needs to be a shared level of commitment, work, a shared level of, why are we here, level of enthusiasm for the partnership, and level of we're gonna get this done. And this becomes really important in those moments when the partnership starts to get a little rocky, or you don't start to agree. But if you have that level of commitment to the purpose that you've created, you will continue to try to overcome some of those barriers or problems that happen, right? So making sure you understand what your organization's level of commitment is is really important so that when you get into those moments, you understand what it is that you're committed to and how much you're willing to give in that partnership. The next one's the obvious one where we're going to kind of lead shared goals and purpose, right? You have to be able to align. If you were in the session before us, we talked a lot about alignment, and obviously you need to have that. The next one is about, how you define success, right? So together, if you define a success in a way that is aligned and you understand each other, you're probably going to get there. But if you have different, understandings of what success is, it's going to be really hard to achieve that because you're not going to have agreed at the beginning. And the last one is kind of connected to the shared level of commitment. Both parties need to really understand internally, what is it that you're willing to give in that partnership? Are you willing to give human resources, funding, expertise? Are you willing to, especially when things get hard or when your own organization is kind of going through something. So understanding what it is that you're able to and have the capacity to give is really important. And that is where we're going to spend some time talking about. So I'm going to pause there. Any thoughts, questions, or additional things that you think are really important for a successful partnership? I love silence. All right. So we all kind of agree that those are good, kind of just basic ingredients for what a successful partnership looks like. All right. So next what we're going to do is on your table, you'll find a worksheet that's called Give and Get Worksheet. If everybody can grab a copy of that, that would be great. So this worksheet is something that I, with a group of people, have come up with that helps organizations who are thinking about partnerships, who are in the midst of negotiating partnerships, who are looking for partners, something that you can use to just guide conversations internally around what it is that you as organization are willing and able to give to a partnership, right? Going back to knowing what types of resources that you can give in a partnership, and what you expect from this partnership. What is it that you would like to get from a partnership? We put this together because we found that a lot of times when people get to the point where they're signing an MOU, or they have a grant agreement with this partnership written in, or they are starting work, they haven't had these internal conversations, right? They haven't really thought to themselves, what am I willing to dedicate? So they might have one person who's really, really gung-ho internally. It's like, I have to have this partnership. This is really important. And nobody else in the organization knows about that partnership, or nobody else in the organization is bought into it, or that partnership might actually be contradictory to some of the other work that's being done, right? So this worksheet basically lays out the questions that I would recommend that organizations explore as they're getting ready to enter into partnerships. That's the intent behind these. I'm going to kind of go through the questions, and then I have some hints on how you might use this worksheet in your work. Does that make sense? All right. Does any of this resonate with people? Okay. So the first question that I always like to ask, and this is because I work with nonprofits, so if you're not a nonprofit, this question may seem a little, a little off the hook a little bit. But how is this partnership going to help you achieve your mission? How is this partnership aligned with the purpose of your organization? How is this partnership going to really help you achieve the mission and vision of the organization in which you're working? That seems like a really simple question, but a lot of times partnerships actually haven't sat down and answered that internally. If you have a strategic plan, it's also useful to add into this question, how does this partnership align with the strategic priorities and goals of the organization in this moment? This seems really straightforward, but it's surprising how many people really have never had that conversation and really thought about it. And in answering this question internally, it helps you understand, if you're writing a grant with this partnership in it, it helps you write that grant. If you answer this question and you're trying to write an MOU, it will help you write that MOU because you'll be able to say, this is why we're doing this, and how it's going to actually help us achieve where we're going in the organization. The next question I recommend folks talking about is around organizational efficiencies and or around organizational resources. Now, this is a question that a lot of times people really don't ask, is if you have an organization that's really small, which is the majority of the organizations I work with, if you only have an executive director or you only have one researcher, how is this partnership going to burden or help with efficiencies that person or the small amount of resources you have achieve mission or to move forward in their work? Is it going to distract them? Maybe that's a good distraction, but maybe it's not, right? But so this is really a question around the resources available to support that partnership. What resources do you have? What resources can you align with the partnership? What resources are available for that partnership? This could be human resources, this could be expertise, this could be funding. A lot of times it's not. Usually you're looking for the funding. But this type of question is something that a lot of organizations just dive right in. Yep, we're really excited. We want this partnership. We don't think about the fact that maybe in 3 months the expertise is not going to be there, or in a year there's a new initiative that's going to overtake whatever this partnership is. So this is really asking you to map out what types of resources do you have available and how will they be contributing to the partnership. Pretty straightforward, but hard to have those conversations. The next question is really looking at what are you contributing specifically, not just the resources, but things like your data sets, your community network, the people that you have that you work with, your donor pool, looking beyond just the kind of basic resources. What are those and how are they going to be contributing and how burdensome is it going to be to have them participating? All right, flipping to the next page. So those are the things that internally, those are the 3 questions that I propose that you would have a conversation with your teams before you move into a partnership. And they're really just around making sure that you have the capacity to enter into and stay in that partnership. Some people add, and one of my colleagues adds a question around how long are those resources available and compares them to the length of the partnership. Because some resources are time limited, right? So that's the kind of internal conversation around what it is that you're getting in the partnership. Then you move on to the next page, and this is where you really start to explore what is it that you want to get out of the partnership, right? What is it that the partnership is going to be able to give you? I did this backwards, didn't I? All right, well, we're going to pretend I did this the other way around, okay, guys? Did it backwards. When you're on the, what are you going to get from the partnership? What you're trying to ask yourself and ask your team internally is, what is it that you really want to achieve? And this is really starting to lay the groundwork for that purpose, right? What is it that you want to get out of this partnership? Are you trying to find, do research around something that's going to help contribute to your mission? Are you trying to come together because there's a specific type of community impact that you want to be able to make? Are you trying to solve a problem, for a resource problem where both your organization is losing funding, but you don't want to give up working with that particular clientele or group of community members? What is it that you would like to do with this partnership? And then once you start kind of defining that internally, are there any things in the organization that might help with a partnership in terms of efficiencies? Is this going to allow you to share funding better? Is this going to allow you to share people together? Is this going to allow you to do some sort of efficiency that's going to allow you to deepen the impact of your organization? And the last thing is, what do you need from your partner? What are you looking to your partner for data? Are you looking to your partner for funding? Are you looking to your partner for any sort of kind of specific thing that the partner is bringing to you? I'm going to pause there. Questions about the way that I did this backwards? Any questions about how you might use this in your organization? I mean, it's great to sit in a conference room and look at a great worksheet, but like, is this going to be something, how might you use this? So I have a couple different kind of thoughts about that. The first is, the first thing that I've noticed is a lot of times when I'm asked to come in and work with an organization, the organic partnership is already way down the line, right? And people have been kind of sort of working together, and they kind of understand who they are, and they call upon each other. This is the reason we came up with the worksheet is exactly for those moments, is because it's really nice to be able to say to both partners, hey, let's pause for a second. Take this to your staff meeting. Take this to your team meeting. Take this to your board meeting. Take this to a meeting that already exists, and slow down and think about what is it that you would like to actually get out of this and give to this partnership, and see if we can help kind of revive this partnership in a way that's a little bit more structured and intentional. Organic partnerships are great, and they usually fizzle out, right? Or they usually have some problems, or they usually have some barriers, or things probably start to fall apart. This type of exercise internally can help save a lot of organic partnerships that aren't really leading to some deep impact. The next thing that I'm going to point out, these internal conversations are hard, especially if you're the champion for this one amazing partnership and nobody else in your organization wants that partnership, right? And everybody's like, nah, we don't really have the time, we don't have the energy, we don't have the resources. Why are you going on and on about this great partnership, Sarah? This is ridiculous. Having a structure, even if you don't use the worksheet, but having a set of questions that you can start to ask internally really does help move the conversation forward. A couple things about who should be a part of those conversations. I think defining who should be part of those conversations is really important, and not just asking any old person within your organization. I usually start with the decision makers, right? Who's going to be able to make a decision on if you can have this partnership go forward or not? Absolutely need to get them involved in the conversation internally. It also could take multiple conversations, right? A lot of times it's about, maybe having a one-time conversation with one person and having another one-time, right? These are all things that you know.
I'm thinking, and maybe I want to just scroll back a moment. So
Yeah.
you're talking about this accidental change of order of the give and the get. So I'm curious about what would the conversation look like, conversation A. You start off with, I want, I need, versus I can give.
Yep.
Or I can give this to the partnership. So that everyone, everyone can say, I want this, I want that, okay.
Yep.
But if you start out with, I can give and you can give, and then, I can give chocolate, I can give peanut
Right.
butter. Out of that we can make Reese's.
Yep, 100%. And I think in the worksheet, the worksheet can be used any way you want, right? Like you can take and, use one side versus the other side. It's always easier to start in the positive, right? People want to hear strengths, want to hear positive things. So if you're starting with, this is what we're willing to give, right? And this is what we would like to get out of the partnership, that order does help. Yeah.
I'm also curious, Sarah, when you use this, do you start with this being done by each organization in the partnership in isolation?
Yes,
And
100%.
then the sort of reflection,
Yep.
consolidation process?
Yeah, so we'll get to that in a second, but when I'm brought in, usually I'm brought in by one person, like one partner. So, right, not by the whole partnership, but by one. Because things are amazing. They're like, hey, let's call a consultant and bring in the consultant to celebrate our success with them. That never happens. No, I'm brought in because there's a problem, right? And so normally I go through this exercise internally with that one organization. And then I say, hey, would you be okay with me, either you reach out, however we reach out to the other partner, and we say, hey, let's have you have this conversation internally as well. And then you come back together, and the second worksheet, which we'll get to in a second, is kind of where you start to pull that information together. Internally, though, that conversation about what you need, that then can become part of like your work plan, right? That can then become part of your own internal kind of processes of making sure that if you're dedicating a staff member, that staff member's work position description, work plan, whatever it is, reflects this work so that it doesn't get lost. If it's part of, if you've said, we have the capacity through funding, make sure that that funding like gets in your budget and make sure it's, right? Like you do this questioning of what you need internally so that you can then enter into your regular work plan so it doesn't get lost and forgotten, right? That there's not just one person sitting in the corner who's like, I'm doing this partnership, but I have no support. This should be part of everything that you're doing if you're committing to a partnership. Does that sort of answer your question? Yes. No, 100%. I did not talk about that, but I think like the value alignment between organizations that are going to partnership is critical. If the values don't align, even before you get to this, you're never going to get to a point of mutual trust, right? You're never going to be able to say, we agree on a lot of different things. So I guess and I will say this, I assumed that when we got to the point where you're actually internally looking at different types of partnerships, you're looking for partners that have a value alignment. Great question. Anything else? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. That is yep, no, that's a really good question. Yep, sorry, the question.
Hi. I was asking, Sarah had started to talk about who should be at the table or who should be part of the conversations about this kind of internal conversation for a partnership. And I asked who in her experience has often not been at the table that should really be there.
That is a really good question. And it completely depends on the organization, right? And a lot of times organizations will start with the executive director. I'm talking about, I'm a nonprofiter, so I'm going to use nonprofit examples. We'll start with the executive director, right? Who will then pull in the ops person and then probably pull in the funding person. And then that's it, right? And there could be a whole team. There could be a community outreach group. There could be all the people that you're working with and in partnership with. So I think that's a good question, and maybe we should adjust our worksheet. Thank you. And ask who else should be at the table in this conversation. And I think it's a good question. Other questions? All right. Before we move on to what, Chris, I know you want to talk about next. Sorry, that's how we compile this information together. We're really lucky we have an actual partnership, two different sides of a partnership that are sitting in the room, and I'm going to ask them to do a couple things. One, just introduce themselves, introduce the partnership, and then talk a little bit about your own internal experience, briefly, of kind of examining internally what you give and get in a partnership.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in this workshop. I'm Dan. I'm at Vermont Electric Power Company. We are a transmission-only entity. We actually have a for-profit structure that delivers cooperative-like value. So when we earn returns, those go back to Vermonters, which is a great vision and mission, right, to create a sustainable Vermont in this way. So that's where we begin. We begin from the vision. And then we look for partners that have the alignment of the vision. And I have the great fortune to be sitting next to partners here at the table, Paige and Terry, at the Spatial Analysis Lab at UVM. And I have the great fortune also to express gratitude, because really this is ultimately a partnership of collaboration, curiosity, and creativity. And the way that it ultimately transpired was it took 9 months on our end to get an internal MOU together about whether or not to work with UVM. Once we did that, once we went through that process, what ended up happening was we had clarity of purpose, clarity about why we're doing what we're looking to do. We were able to participate in the initial conversations with the Spatial Analysis Lab, with Jarlath, and when he had his tragic passing, really the Spatial Analysis Lab was at the table saying, this is the type of commitment that Jarlath had made, this is the vision, right? So they were a great partner to have we found each other, right? And through this and through all the different challenges that we encountered through this project, it's really been clear that it was resilient by design. So I would say that from the standpoint of what it actually took to get that memorandum of understanding across the finish line was to begin from a place of skepticism, total skepticism. What is it actually that UVM is going to bring? What are the specific practical deliverables? And I refer to this as hyper-realism. You have to be a practitioner of hyper-realism. Think about the art of the possible, look what we could do together, but practice hyper-realism. So the team member who we included during our project was IT. Get IT in the room day one. It's about data sharing, it's about secure file transfers. All of the different nuts and bolts of how the project really works are about IT data sharing. Once that was on board, everything started to move so we could collaborate, share information, provide feedback back to the Spatial Analysis Lab. So overall, thanks to the support from the Leahy Institute, which really has a seed grant model for us, that's what we ended up being able to pursue. That seed grant has actually just begun a partnership for which I know we have independent reasons of wanting to continue working together. So the seed has been planted, and we are able to move that forward because we did all that work up front on that MOU. So Paige, over to you.
That was awesome. You heard a couple things, just one couple things. One, you heard like he knew who would need to be in the room, right? To your question, but he also was able to connect kind of the purpose of the partnership to the mission, right? And to like why align the work with the mission of the organization, which is such an important piece of the whole puzzle.
Yeah, Dan, I feel like that you hit on mostly everything that we also thought of in the room. Because, well, first, I'm Paige Brochu. I'm the director of the Spatial Analysis Lab. I'm joined with Terry as well, who's our data development lead. And Terry has been very important in the Solver project that we are working on, which we are closing up, which is exciting. But it's to be continued, right? Because, again, it's a seed grant, planted the seed. Now we're going to see where it bears fruit, which is really exciting. But to honestly follow up with that, I mean, this was also a project that was started, the inception and the first conversations were really with my predecessor, Jarlath. And then once he passed, it was like, Dan asked, do you still want to even do this project? Do you still have the capacity, the technical expertise to actually do this project and do it with, you know, everything else that's going on? So one, I feel like we really trauma bonded over that passing, and then also as a team. But then Jarlath had made the commitment and we still had the technical chops to do the work. So internally, it was really thinking about, you know, without Jarlath, can our team really pick up and be able to provide that technical support? So then leveraging who in the team do we now need to kind of step up their responsibility, change their position description, because now they're stepping into new roles. They're leading projects. I also want to give a shout out to Maeve, who went from geospatial technician to now a research specialist, because she actually just led the entire Solver project. I was a co-PI, but honestly, I think Maeve should have been the co-PI. So thinking about, right, like what can we give without kind of, you know, that leader that was at the beginning stages of this project, but then also what can we get from it? And what we can get is really good partnerships with the utilities, right, across the state, thinking about our rural engagement as well, because a lot of the work that we've previously done is urban areas. So thinking about what can we get is honestly just those relationship buildings from the community. And then also now thinking about, we're also building our methodology. So we get that by being a part of this awesome collaboration. I can go on forever about it, but I'm going to pause.
No, that was great. Thank you. There's a couple really cool things that you said. One, you incorporated it into position descriptions, right? And you created positions that are around that. Not every organization is going to be able to do that, but the fact that you're thinking systemically within your organization about how you're going to incorporate those things that you've committed to within your systems existing, that's important for the kind of the longevity of partnerships. The second interesting thing that you talked about is how you might use the same questions to check in on the partnership along the way, right? So I've set this up as like, this is what you do before you have the partnership and what you do internally, but organizations change, right? The environment in which we all sit as organizations change as well. So using these questions along the way to make sure you still continue to have that capacity, right? To continue to check in on, does this still align with the mission? Does this still align with our strategic plan? Does this still align with how we want to be moving forward? I think is important as well. So this shouldn't be static. You should be continually asking some of these questions internally to make sure that the partnership is continued to be supported as the partnership continues. So thank you for that. Another good piece of insight there. All right, so you've had these internal conversations. You have a good sense of what you need. You have thought about maybe how you might incorporate what you need and what you're willing and able to give to this partnership into your systems. And now you're coming to the table with your partners. And you want to kind of use what you would like to get out of the partnerships to start to co-design a purpose statement. Sometimes your purpose statement is given to you. If you're in a grant, sometimes the grant's going to say, this is your purpose, and you have to kind of decide, does that fit and work together? Other times, you're actually getting to create those, the purpose statement together. So in front of you, you have another cool little worksheet that we've come up with. This one isn't quite as streamlined as the other. It's been used a little bit less. But as in the other worksheet, these are questions. These worksheets really are just a set of questions that you can use as you bring people together. So when we've used this worksheet, we bring the partners together. We ask them to bring to the table, what is it that you would like to get out of this partnership? To the extent that they're willing to share, we have them share that information, right? So it's a facilitated conversation where you basically say, hey, what do you want to get out of this partnership? What do you want to get out of the partnership? So in the worksheet, I have a place for you to write it down, but that's the first step, right? Is to kind of hear from your partners, what is it that you're looking to get out of this partnership, right? What is it that and then you look at where are the commonalities, right? And hopefully, if you have values that are aligned and you have missions that are moving together, you're going to be able to find some commonalities, right? And commonalities isn't that you want to, trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. Commonalities are where you would like to see the partnership move together, right? You look at those similarities, you decide if you all agree on those, right? This is pretty straightforward stuff, but a lot of times partnerships don't pause at this moment and actually say, what is it that we want to get out of the partnership? And so this is a moment to stop and pause and look and bring those commonalities together. I don't just stop there. I say, okay, well, what conflicts or challenges might you see if we were to take these commonalities and create it into one purpose statement? How is that going to be received within your organization? How is it going to be perceived with whoever it is, the community in which you're working, right? Because partnerships sometimes can change the relationship you have with communities that you're working. And so making sure that when you look at those commonalities that have now become your purpose statement, how is that going to be taken or reflected or used within your community where you're working? Is that going to cause any sort of problems with your internally with your staff? Is it going to cause any problems with your donors? Is it going to cause problems with your entire group of stakeholders? And if so, then you bring those kind of challenges back to your internal team, and you have a conversation with them, and you decide how to move forward. On the second page, there's a couple sets of questions around things that might come up in those conversations. Some people might have things that they need to get out of this around this partnership, and that's impossible, right? Like the partnership's not going to achieve that. And that's okay, but I think it's important to name that, because if you don't name that, people might walk away and that trust might be broken, right? A lot of these questions are really around naming things that you may not, around having intentional conversations, right? What intentionally are you trying to do with the partnership? The next question is really around, before you finalize the purpose statement, what does everybody need to know? Is there anything that any kind of questions that might come up, any kind of challenges that might come up, any kind of things that you might want to celebrate before you finalize this purpose statement? This came up because in one of the groups I was working with, we got all the way to the point, we had this great purpose statement, it was amazing, everybody agreed upon it, and somebody, 2 meetings in, somebody was like, well, when we use that word, everybody's gonna be insulted. And, this is 2 or 3 meetings in, we've been talking about these words. And so things like that can come up, right? And so this question is your moment to pause and think like deeper than just, is this okay? Because most people kind of glaze over at that point in the conversation. Is this purpose statement that we've got okay? Yeah, it's fine, totally fine. We're good. And then you go put it out in the community, or you put in your grant, or you put in your MOU, and there's a problem. So this is the pause question around like, will this work and be validated within the stakeholders and groups that you are working with? And then the last question, nobody ever asks this question in my experience, and this comes up, who gets to approve it? Who actually approves that purpose statement that you've just worked so hard to create? And within each organization, there could be completely different levels of approval. And so part of why we put that on the worksheet is so that if you know in your organization that your board chair who never approves anything or is never available, is going to be the one that needs to approve it, you need to start socializing that sooner rather than later. And this came up, of course, as a consultant, this comes up, these little challenges come up and you put questions or worksheets because of it, because, we, again, had gotten all the way down the line and, the board said in one of the organizations, there's no way we're ever going to approve that. And we were like, okay, well, this is 2 months of work. And so, making sure you understand who's going to approve those purpose statements for you is really important so you can start socializing them sooner. I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So in our case, just to share an example, the purpose statement was not new. What we did was we agreed that, in fact, if we tried to propose a new purpose statement, nothing would happen. Our partnership would not be able to proceed. So the ability to proceed sometimes with a partner can be that you actually are beginning from a shared purpose statement to begin with. So again, that takes a little bit more work up front, right, to find those partners that really make sense. But we knew that was not an option. And because we have to stay focused. We have a mission that we're focused on, and that's what we're there to do. So I would just offer that is something that can happen as well.
Absolutely. And yes, purpose statements can be given to you from your donors. They can be given to you from your community partners. They can be given to you because the organization has come up with this amazing purpose for the partnership that they're looking for, and they're selling themselves to other partners and looking for partners to join them, right? So what I've given you is when you have that opportunity to sit together with a group of people that are coming up together for the purpose statement. If you are given a purpose statement, you have to decide internally, does that work for you or not? And will that lead to the type of impact that you would like to have with the partnership? So thank you, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Let me take the mic. My question is, and I don't have the answer, so I'm asking it, is how do you know the unknown unknowns? Especially if you have two different groups coming together from 2 different worlds with 2 different sets of expectations, languages. What you reminded me about knowing who has to approve things in advance. This hit me really hard 20 years ago when I was a PhD student at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I spent a whole year with all sorts of faculty groups and graduate student groups coming up with a graduate student Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. We got to the end of the year faculty meeting, and then someone's hand went up and said, you didn't talk to our committee yet. So I spent another year talking to all the other committees in campus that I didn't know about, which no one told me about, until after 2 years we got approval and it got passed and it's still on their website. So how can you at least increase the chances of figuring out the unknowns that you don't know yet?
I mean, you hand me the question that's completely impossible to answer, right? I think there's a couple things that I would say. One, this is a really oversimplified process, right? I'm giving you a set of questions that you're probably going to use over a period of time with multiple meetings with multiple people, right? This is not one conversation, you're done, out the door, right? And in those conversations, you're going to dive deeper into what you don't know, right? And if I can take from the past, for the session that was just before me, leaning into curiosity really helps, right? And making sure you're asking lots of questions, even if they seem like questions that, you know, you should know the answer to, right? And I think another thing is kind of asking the question that I think you brought up is who's not in the room that should be in the room, right? Like that will also help. So I think there's a couple things that we've learned along the way where, you know, you're not going to know what you don't know. By definition, but I think, you know, leaning into curiosity, making sure you're looking around the room and you're saying to yourself, who isn't here that should be here is important. Understanding that it is a process, right? And in that process of having multiple conversations, you're leading to some mutual trust, right? Because you're coming to the table multiple times over and over again, and you're making sure you're deepening the relationship and deepening the understanding of where your partner is coming from and what your partner needs, as much as your own internal conversations with your organization. So not a good answer to a really hard question, but I think, you know, remain curious about all things. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think also just maintaining the idea that things can change at the drop of a hat, right? And just being flexible with it. So at the end of the day, I think just always coming back to like the MOU or the working agreement, right? So like that's what we had in the past as well, is to be like, all right, so like this changed. So we actually ran into this problem in our partnership. We realized that the initial goal of the Spatial Analysis Lab for this project was to identify power lines and electrical infrastructure using the new statewide LiDAR, so that's elevation data that was taken, and then finding out that we couldn't do that. So then it's going back to the drawing board and just being flexible and saying, what else then can we do with the great relationships that we have with Belco and the other distributions to at least provide something that's usable, something that they can then do something with and that they didn't have beforehand that our skills can maintain. So I think it's just being able to be flexible and just adapt when the situation changes, because you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you're like, oh, I didn't know that I was supposed to talk to these 5 other people.
Yeah.
But
And one friendly amendment, interpersonal relationships and FaceTime. I would say that those investments that we made early on made the pivoting so much easier. So I would just name that.
Yeah, no, and I would that was what I was going to say, is like, the intent behind these worksheets is not to have cold meetings, right? The intent is really to deepen the relationships that you're forging with your partners, right? And these are giving kind of just a little bit of intentional structure to those conversations that are going to really build the foundation for the partnerships that are going to need to be flexible and adaptive and move forward, right? I'm proposing that there's some pre-work you should do within your organization, but I'm also understanding and saying you need to be able to ask these questions throughout the partnership. These are important things that are going to help you stay intentional to who you are as an organization and what the purpose of the partnership is over time. Does that make sense? Other questions? I'll get to you next. No, I'm good here.
Thanks. I just have a question that relates to having this conversation between 2 organizations with grossly different levels of power. And so I'm on the faculty in community development and applied economics. I've been running student internships in the Northeast Kingdom for the past 2 years with support from the Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships. And as I think about these initial conversations, like UVM enters negotiations from an extreme position that says, if we don't pay for anything and we commit no personnel and we assume no insurance liabilities and we issue no guarantee of a sustained commitment for any period of time whatsoever, we might approve it. And that ends up being a very, very difficult start to a conversation around mutual trust. And then you can sort of add to that there's always this fear that in the back of somebody's mind, UVM is revisiting, is this really beneficial to us? Is this really beneficial to us? Is this really beneficial to us? And some of these things, including those shared statements of purpose, are a reflection of that real fear that if we don't make our statement of purpose align with what we think they want, they'll just disappear. And so I don't know how much staff and personnel Velco has, Dan, but I'm sure that there's more staff and personnel than at the Greensboro Free Library or the Hardwick Food Pantry. And I also think that when the University of Vermont says, we'll do this if you assume all the insurance liability, you have the people who can say, well, no, and push back on that and end up with more equitable, more durable partnerships. And so I guess just what are best practices for doing this when the power structures are so different?
From the experience we had, hyper-realism. So we say, this is a seed grant. We know exactly what UVM is saying they can do and what they're saying they can't do. We're looking at that. But we're playing the long game here. So we're talking about a talent pipeline that is going to feed into not only Velco, but the whole power sector. So just anecdotally, our internship program that we've been running, we had a very few interns a few years ago. We revamped it, and we really reached out to our partners at University of Vermont, the Career Center in particular. Thank you again, Amanda, for your partnership there. And what ended up happening was that we started getting more and more interns applying from UVM into our program. And now I think we have like 5 interns just from UVM, which is just to say that we are recognizing there are some fundamental pieces and parts to this story where there are students, talent pipeline coming through, the awareness of what the projects are, right, meeting UVM where it is, that allowed us to really facilitate a process by which we know there's going to be talent. It's worth it for all of the different functions that they can provide, and not trying to change UVM through this partnership, but rather to inspire our friends and partners to say, look what we can do when we work together. And so that then allowed us to really get some productive results. Hope that helps.
I mean, I don't really feel like I have anything else to say on that. Go ahead, Paige. I had a couple of things I'll add at the end.
Yeah, I just think quickly too, it's like even having a partnership identify key barriers, right? That like we as like, well, speaking for myself, as like an administrator basically in my role within UVM, identify these institutional barriers that are like, with this contract, then you are putting everything on us, and is this really fair? And then coming back to the table. I mean, I agree with Dan. I don't know if necessarily like every partnership can have institutional changes across the entire university because we are a large organization. But I think just bringing that to the table and then just having that honest discussion to be like, well, then how can we just protect each other in this agreement, right? And then writing that very clearly, and then it's signed and it's a contract, legally binding, and then kind of going from there. But I think bringing all of this to the table helps then administrators like myself or directors say, oh, I didn't realize that. Now I'm going to talk to the people that I know who might have power to change it.
Yeah, I agree 100% with the realism, and part of the reason we came up with this worksheet is to give people questions to ask to help bring to the table those pieces of information that is needed to kind of explore and understand. So that's one, is, honesty is the only way you're going to get to mutual trust, and maybe in those power imbalances, maybe you're not going to change the power, right? But you can change the level of information that decisions are being made, right? And so allowing people to have the information so they can make good decisions for themselves can help, I guess. And I'm just going to end it there. The other thing I was, struck with in your question is there's different levels of partnership. There's kind of contractual partnerships in which you're, contractually bound to doing certain things, to informal partnerships, which may lead eventually to a much more formalized partnership. But if you start in a place where you're really just kind of exploring and it's not formalized in an MOU or a contract or a statement, maybe that'll allow for a little bit more trust to be built, and maybe a little bit more radical realism to be kind of brought to the table, and that's that organic part, those organic conversations and partnerships that kind of sometimes lead to more formalized ones. Most of the organizations I work with are small, right? Most of them, bring similar levels of capacity to the table, but may have different levels of influence and power within the community or within each other. And so the kind of conversations we have are probably a little bit different than the ones between UVM and a Northeast Kingdom Youth Center or, Greensboro Community Church. So, yeah, hope some of those answers helped. It's a good question. Did you have a question? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. Any other questions?
One other response. This is a great question.
It is a good
and
question.
what I think I should also add is that once we had the MOU in place, what we were able to then do is to make proposals, some strategically unreasonable, to our friends and say, look at the opportunity cost. Look what you're missing out on. We could do this if you changed this little mechanism right here. So, but once we had the conversation, we had built the trust and built the rapport, we understand they're the institution that has all these different checks and balances for very good reasons. A lot of these checks are there for important checks, just for validation and making sure that everything is what it should be, right? But from that standpoint, then we can point to that missed opportunity if we don't proceed. But unless we have that relationship, we can't make that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dan. Other questions?
I know we're right at the end of the time, but I'm wondering how many people in the room are forging partnerships that have multiple partners. I feel like there's been this conversation around duality, but I wonder how the complexity of certain partnerships that will not succeed without all people at the table, as Nicole was sharing. I'd really love to expand on that at some future time.
Yeah, multiple partnerships where you kind of move towards a collaborative or a shared service or a shared benefit or some sort of kind of collective impact. Multiple models for what it looks like to be in a partnership with multiple partnerships is very much dual, collaborative or coordination or collective or all these other networks, right? You know, it becomes utterly much more complicated. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I know we're close to time, so I'm not going to go on and on about it. But there is a study right now that's being done across the state of Vermont on the types of collaboratives and collaborative structures and things that we need as nonprofits to come together more effectively and more efficiently. That might be of interest to you just because it's going to start to look at how do we as Vermonters do that sort of collaborative work together. And that might help answer some of the questions. I'm sure there's a lot because you know, I've simplified this into a really lovely worksheet that is not going to work in every case for multiple partner kind of collaborative structures. So, I don't know, do you have a specific question that you're dealing with right now that you wanted to?
I think you answered it in some ways by saying there is work being done to look at that multi-level structures.
Yep.
Especially if one of the partners, for lack of a better term, is the primary beneficiary of the work that you as two other nonprofits collaborate on, the work that's going to make sure that we're investing a little bit this and we're investing what we're bringing into the table and the resources and capacity and all that to benefit
This organization.
number three.
Yep.
And it's not even just one entity, it's like, I'm on the
Yeah, no, I mean, those, right, oh, healthcare, yeah, I'm not going to touch healthcare right now. I don't think we have enough time in the day for that. But yeah, be on the lookout, there is some research and some surveys being done around that. Can you tell us where to find that? So I erroneously about 6 months ago said, hey, how do we collaborate across the state of Vermont? Like, what does that look like? And no, I'm not a researcher. I'm a small-time, consultant, and so I asked the question, and I started this thing. It snowballed, and so we've done a first-level survey that has the first-level results. About 50 different collaboratives across the state have responded to this. Everything from umbrella organizations and networks to kind of small grassroots. They call themselves associations. And that data is being analyzed by myself and an amazing little group of advisors that I've put together. And we are going to be having 2 workshops next month. The date and times are still coming up, but I'll make sure that it gets out through somebody. And so I'm on their advisory committee, and one of the workshops is being done in collaboration with them. The other one's being done in collaboration with the Vermont Council on Rural Development. So if you look on either one of those two websites, once the information is done and ready, it'll be up there.
We're happy to post it to the, I don't think that one's on. There's a resources page available on the Leahy Institute RISE website where we're going to be posting both of these workshops for you, worksheets for you from the workshop. And we can also post a link to that study when it's done if you'd like that. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope there were some nuggets in this that you can take away. Feel free to take away some of those worksheets. When you get them electronically, they're amazing because you can just pull up the questions and you don't have to use them as a worksheet. So thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the conference.